Have you ever heard of a man who was a master criminal, a legendary escape artist, and then became the world's first private detective? It sounds like something straight out of a novel, but it's the true story of one of the most fascinating figures in history, Eugène François Vidocq. His life was a whirlwind of crime, punishment, and a redemption arc so dramatic, it inspired literary giants like Victor Hugo and Edgar Allan Poe. Today, we're diving deep into the incredible life of the man who blurred the lines between lawbreaker and law enforcer, and in doing so, created modern criminology. Born in 1775 in Arras, France, Vidocq was a troublemaker from the start. His father was a baker, but young Eugène had little interest in the family business. He was a wild child, a skilled fencer, and had a reputation for getting into duels and petty theft. By his early teens, he was already an accomplished thief. In one infamous incident, he stole his family's entire silver savings, only to be swindled out of it just days later. His youth was a blur of enlistments in the army, desertions, and joining traveling puppet shows and circuses. He lived a life on the fringes, constantly on the move, honing his skills of disguise and deception. His criminal career truly began to escalate, leading to numerous arrests. But here's where Vidocq's legend starts to grow. Prisons couldn't hold him. He became a master of escape, pulling off daring and ingenious breakouts that left authorities baffled. He'd use forged documents, create makeshift keys, and even disguise himself as a nun to simply walk out of captivity. His reputation spread throughout the French underworld. He was both respected and feared. But this life on the run was exhausting. Constantly looking over his shoulder, Vidocq grew tired of being a fugitive. He yearned for a different life, a legitimate one. In 1809, at the age of 34, Vidocq made a decision that would change the course of his life and the history of law enforcement forever. He was in prison yet again, facing a long sentence. He decided to flip the script. He offered the Paris police an audacious deal. In exchange for his freedom, he would become an informant. He would use his intimate knowledge of the criminal underworld, its people, its methods, its language, to help them catch other criminals. The police were skeptical, but they were also desperate. Crime in post-revolutionary Paris was rampant, and they were losing the battle. They decided to take a chance on Vidocq. Initially, he worked as a spy within the prisons, gathering intelligence on his fellow inmates. His results were so spectacular that the authorities soon granted him a pardon. But Vidocq wasn't done. He proposed an even more radical idea. In 1811, he established a plainclothes criminal investigation unit, the Sûreté Nationale. This was revolutionary. At the time, policing was mostly done by uniformed officers who were easily spotted by criminals. Vidocq's Sûreté was different. It was a small, hand-picked team of detectives, many of whom were ex-convicts themselves. They understood the criminal mind because they had been criminals. They operated in the shadows, using disguises, infiltration, and surveillance techniques that were unheard of at the time, but are standard police procedure today. Vidocq himself was a master of disguise, able to transform into a beggar, a merchant, or an old man to get close to his targets. He believed that to catch a criminal, you had to think like one. He was a pioneer in what we now call criminal profiling. He meticulously documented information about known criminals, creating extensive card index files with their descriptions, methods, and past crimes. This was the world's first criminal database. Under his leadership, the Sûreté achieved incredible success. Crime rates in Paris plummeted. Vidocq and his team brought down notorious gangs and solved some of the most baffling cases of the era. He became a public hero, a living legend. His methods were unorthodox, but they were undeniably effective. He introduced forensic techniques that were light years ahead of his time. He was one of the first to use plaster casts to preserve footprints at a crime scene, and developed indelible ink and unalterable bond paper to combat forgery. He even conducted early ballistic tests, proving that a specific bullet was fired from a particular gun. He was, in essence, the original Sherlock Holmes, but he was real. However, his success bred jealousy and suspicion within the official police force. They resented this ex-convict who was outshining them. They saw his methods as morally ambiguous and his reliance on other ex-criminals as dangerous. Despite his incredible track record, he was constantly under scrutiny. In 1827, after years of political pressure and internal conflict, Vidocq resigned from the street. But a man like Vidocq couldn't simply retire into obscurity. His next act was just as groundbreaking. In 1833, he founded the world's first known private detective agency, the Bureau des Renseignements, which translates to the Office of Information. For a fee, he and his team of agents would help private citizens with matters the official police wouldn't handle. They investigated cases of fraud, located missing persons, and performed background checks for businesses. He essentially commercialized detective work, creating an entire industry that thrives to this day. He was again a pioneer, proving that his skills were valuable not just to the state, but to the public as well. Of course, this new venture once again put him at odds with the authorities, who saw his private agency as a challenge to their monopoly on law enforcement. He was arrested multiple times on charges of impersonating a police officer and unlawful imprisonment. But his sharp legal mind and public support usually led to his acquittal. He had become a master of navigating both the criminal and the legal worlds. In his later years, Vidocq wrote his memoirs. While they were heavily embellished and sensationalized for dramatic effect, they became international bestsellers. These stories of his incredible life, from thief to thief-taker, captivated the public imagination. They directly inspired some of the greatest characters in literature. Victor Hugo based both his heroic Jean Valjean and the relentless Inspector Javert in Les Miserables on different aspects of Vidocq's life. Edgar Allan Poe, the father of the modern detective story, created his character C. Auguste Dupin after reading about Vidocq's methods of logical deduction and observation. The influence is undeniable. Eugène François Vidocq passed away in 1857 at the age of 81. He lived a life that was more extraordinary than any fiction. He was a man of contradictions, a criminal who became a lawman, a rogue who brought order, a social outcast who laid the foundations for modern policing. His legacy is immense. Every time a detective goes undercover, every time a forensic scientist analyzes a footprint, every time a profiler builds a picture of an unknown subject, they are walking in the footsteps of Vidocq. He proved that sometimes the greatest insights into darkness come from someone who has spent time living in it. So the next time you watch a crime drama or read a detective novel, remember the real-life figure who started it all. The baker's son from Arras who became a master criminal, an inescapable prisoner, the chief of the street, and the world's first private eye, the one and only Eugène François Vidocq. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories from history.